Part 3, A New Future. Chapter 11, Possible or Probable. The quote is, "It's kind of fun to do the impossible." Walt Disney. There's a chance it rains frogs tomorrow. And that's a bold statement, I know. But it's actually true. It might happen. And in fact, lots of things might happen tomorrow. Pigs might fly, the world might end, I might even finally win the lottery and buy that island I've had my eye on. But none of those things are probable, are they? So, none of us are going to run out and buy frog proof umbrellas, flying pig insurance, or a ticket to my island resort. No. The fact is, despite these things being possible, none of us are going to plan our life around them. We plan our lives around what is probable, not possible. At least after we hit 30 and give up on that band we're in. And that brings us back to the idea of technological resurrection being presented in this book. Is it possible that when we die, a technologically advanced society will warp our minds into the future? Sure. It's becoming more and more obvious as science continues to drag us kicking and screaming into some kind of magical, mystical post singularity wonderland that almost anything will be possible one day. Virtual reality universes, honest politicians, anything. But a frogacane or Sharknado is also possible, so that's really not saying much, is it? No, the real question now is how probable is all of this? And my answer is that it's probably pretty probable. Technological resurrection is a naturally emerging idea. The first shiny factoid that suggests that this is the path that we are on is that technological resurrection isn't really that rare of an idea. And this is important. As much as I'd like to puff out my chest and pretend that I climbed the figurative Mount Everest of ideas here, techno resurrection isn't like relativity or quantum mechanics. We don't need to be a certified genius with crazy hair to think it up. We just have to drink a bit of coffee, have an open mind, and read some science fiction. In fact, the truth is that cosmists aren't the only people who have thought about technological resurrection. While the exact flavor that I have chosen to champion is a new incarnation, something I will refer to from this point on as temporal resurrection. Technological resurrection in and of itself is always going to be with us in some form. People think about technology, people think about resurrection a lot, and once in a blue moon, someone puts the two together. And I'm not just saying this, people have already been thinking about this idea in this book, and I can prove it because they are in popular culture even now. Interstellar. The first work of fiction that I'm going to point to is the most popular, if least similar example. A movie you've probably seen but haven't thought about once while reading this book. A little movie called Interstellar. Maybe you've heard of it. Spoilers ahead. Now, just in case you haven't seen it, the movie is about a wormhole through space being discovered. Astronauts then go and launch themselves through it because, why not? In order to find a new world for mankind to relocate to. At the end of the movie, however, it is revealed that the wormhole through space was actually created by future humans who have mastered space-time. So, as you can see, this concept of future people reaching back through space-time in a weird and mysterious way to give us a hand is already out there. It's been out there. We've even been watching movies about it. We just didn't pay it much mind. Free Jack. Now, while Interstellar had some temporal engineering stuff in it, this next movie falls much closer to my idea of temporal resurrection. This little known 1992 flick is named Free Jack and stars the illustrious Emilio Estevez, Anthony Hopkins, and Mick Jagger. The plot is about a rich guy in the future who has uploaded his mind into a computer. After he does this, he decides he needs a physical body to pour his evil consciousness back into. His solution? Reach back a dozen years or so in time and transport Emilio Estevez out of his race car a split second before it crashes and explodes. So no one will notice and the timeline won't get messed up. And then our villain tries to put his mind into Emilio's body. But hijinks ensue. Once again, not quite technological resurrection as I have outlined it, but it's definitely in the right neighborhood. And this movie not only covers AI, mind transplantation, and the reaching back in time to retrieve stuff, but it also makes it very clear that doing so is a delicate business. Can't mess up the timeline and whatnot. Millennium. And then there's the Chris Christopherson epic, Millennium. And I'm calling it an epic because everything Chris Christopherson does is epic in my book. In a similar vein to Free Jack, this 1989 film is about a dystopian future society. In this one, however, they need healthy humans to repopulate the Earth. Their solution? Take them from the past. But they don't want to mess up the timeline either. So they create portals to space-time to plane crashes throughout history. The portals open inside the passenger cabins while the planes are in mid-air, right before they start to go down. The future people escort the passengers out of the past and into the future, replacing their corpses with facsimiles, and everyone's happy. The Light of Other Days. Now, The Light of Other Days is a novel written by Stephen Baxter in the year 2000, but it is entirely based on a synopsis written by Arthur C. Clarke. In it, a technologically advanced society gains the ability to use space-time wormholes to view what anyone, anywhere, is doing. This creates enough social havoc on its own, kind of like what Facebook's FaceTime is doing to our society right now. But eventually, these wormholes are able to look back through time. And by the end of the book, they are using the information they gather from the past to resurrect people. Sound familiar? Now, to be honest, I was shocked when I discovered this novel even existed. I had never heard of it before, but it basically laid out all of my ideas. And it was dreamt up by Arthur C. Clarke, one of the most influential science fiction authors of all time, the writer of 2001, A Space Odyssey for one, just in case you aren't familiar with him. Now, although the people in this novel are uploaded from the past and into the future, it is slightly different than temporal resurrection or Fyodorov's vision. This fiction falls more in line with the idea of technological recreation, where we clone someone's body complete with their memories and personality. And this little philosophical stumbling block is even discussed in the last few paragraphs of the novel. Spoiler alert. But, he said slowly, are they the same people? Am I me? Some philosophers argue that it's possible. Leibniz's identity of indiscernibles tells us that you are, but you don't think so. No, I'm sorry. Those are my little voices. It is worth noting, however, that the goal of this future society is to ultimately create a clone of everyone who ever lived, similar to Fyodorov's idea of total technological resurrection. Although Fyodorov specifically pointed out he wanted to avoid cloning and he wanted actual resurrection. And it's even pointed out in the book that space colonization will be used to take care of the population problems. And finally, I don't see these infusion of cosmos ideas as pure chance either, as this book is rife with them. And Konstantin Tsiolkovsky is actually quoted by a character in the book. Coincidence? I think not. I've literally never heard anyone else quote Tsiolkovsky. Altered Carbon. Altered Carbon is a popular 2002 hard-boiled cyberpunk novel by Richard K. Morgan. In the dystopian future setting of this novel, death has been conquered with mind transfer technology. Essentially, people's bodies are fitted with a device called a stack at the base of their skull. This holds their consciousness. And so even if their body is killed, their stack can be put into a new body. Because of how people can transfer their consciousness, bodies in this future are called sleeves. I felt a particular need to mention this book, actually a whole series, because it has been turned into a Netflix series and therefore will probably be an introduction for most people into the idea of technological resurrection and mind transference, uploading, and transplantation. So, go check out the books or just watch it on Netflix. The Transhumanist Wager. The Transhumanist Wager is a 2013 fictional novel written by Zoltan Isfan, a former reporter for the National Geographic Channel, the first ever science candidate who ran for president on the Transhumanist Party ticket, and also an all-around good-natured, charismatic guy who somehow looks like a cross between an Abercrombie and Fitch model and a blue-collared still worker. You'd understand my description if you saw him, so Google him, do it now. And you're as likely to find him surfing in a wetsuit as giving a speech on artificial intelligence. Although these days he's probably pretty busy since he's now running to be governor of California on the Libertarian ticket. The Transhumanist Wager follows the story of Jethro Knights, a very hardcore, and that's putting it mildly, transhumanist philosopher whose thoughts initially follow similar patterns as mine and other present day transhumanists and life extensionists. I cover transhumanism in chapter 12 of this book in case you're wondering what it is. Essentially, Jethro feels society should be focusing on using technology to cure disease, achieve an indefinite lifespan, and essentially overcome death, something called immortality. Although as the book progresses and after some personal tragedy, Jethro becomes a zealot, willing to do anything, even employing a massive violence to achieve his goals. Over the course of the book, the protagonist battles against the rising violent theocratic institutions of the world who feel science should be limited, controlled, and outside the realm of more traditionally spiritual things. But eventually, Jethro establishes a transhumanist society called Transhumania. And after some fairly brutal, cutthroat violence and tactics, he essentially takes over the world and leads or forces civilization in that direction. And while Jethro Knights is more focused on using technology for indefinite life extension on the living, his love interest, Zoe Bach, has a quantum Zen outlook and believes that death is part of life, and that perhaps one day technology will be so advanced that quantum technology will allow the dead to be resurrected. Though she doesn't say this exactly. To date, this book is probably one of the most highly regarded and important books in transhumanist circles, and Zoltan has now become one of the foremost figures in the transhumanist movement. Zoltan's real-life transhumanist wager boils down to, as he says through his character Jethro Knights, if a reasoning human being loves and values life, they will want to live as long as possible. The desire to be immortal. Nevertheless, it's impossible to know if they're going to be immortal once they die. To do nothing doesn't help the odds of attaining immortality, since it seems evident that everyone will die someday and possibly cease to exist. To try to do something scientifically constructive towards ensuring immortality beforehand is the most logical conclusion. And I agree wholeheartedly, of course, with this statement. Immortality Incorporated. And this list wouldn't be complete unless I mentioned Immortality Incorporated, a book that is pretty much about temporal resurrection exactly as I have laid it out, except people are put into donor bodies instead of freshly printed ones. And guess what? It just so happens that the movie Free Jack was based on this 1959 science fiction novel by Robert Sheckley. Of course, the ideas in the original novel were thought out far better than what ended up in the movie adaptation. The plot is pretty good too. The novel revolves around a man who dies in contemporary New Jersey, only to find himself resurrected in another man's body, far in the future, his mind having been pulled from the past and transplanted into the new body via time travel. Ultimately, this book is the most complete version of temporal resurrection that I have found yet in fiction, and I suggest you give it a read if you get too bored. An eternal idea. So, there you have it. Not only did a bunch of reputable philosophers, authors, and scientists take this idea seriously all the way back in the 1800s, but it has also been with us in popular science fiction from the days of Frankenstein to the present and will continue to be with us until there is some kind of biblical resurrection or it is actually done. This idea will emerge again and again. It's not an idea like disco that emerged in a specific time and place and will never come again, if we're lucky. No, as long as humanity exists, this idea will float around, and there will be the possibility that some scientists start taking the idea seriously. But still, it's just a possibility that scientists will take this idea seriously and work on it, right? I mean, even if the idea is out there, scientists will probably keep dismissing it, right? Well, no. In the next chapter, I show how a lot of them are already working on forms of technological resurrection.